Hey, it's Benjie Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of People of Distinction, the talk that gives an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, peopleofdistinction.org for more info, or you can always email me directly at benji@alcoleenterprises.com. And on the line with us today, we have Bonnie Lou Oliver. We'll be discussing her wonderful book, FAITHWALK, From Darkness to Light. Available for purchase through Amazon as well as barnesandnoble.com. But guys, listen, if you want to gather everything that Bonnie has in store, do yourself a favor and head directly to her personal site. And that's BonnieOliverFaithWalk.com. That's BonnieOliver, traditional spelling of faith and walk.com. There you'll find more information on Bonnie herself, more information on this fantastic narrative, as well as find the hyperlinks set up to take you to the purchasing page. So one more time, that's BonnieOliverFaithWalk.com. And I will say, Bonnie was brought to our network, People of Distinction, today by some of the best publishers in the business. Parchment Global Publishing. So if you have a book that you'd like moved, do yourself a favor and contact Parchment. You can find out more information on them at parchmentglobalpublishing.com. So without further ado, let's get it going. Bonnie, first and foremost, welcome to People of Distinction, and thank you so much for being a guest. How are you?
I'm just fine, and thank you, Benji, for the opportunity to speak to the audience.
Listen, the wisdom that we're going to be able to receive from you today, as well as when we pick up the book, is second to none. Okay, and it's a fantastic opportunity for everybody involved, myself included. So I truly mean it. This is an absolute pleasure and such a delight having you on. Now, Bonnie, I know we have so much information to cover. So first and foremost, let's start at the beginning stages. Did you ever think that you would write a book?
No, I never did, especially because I had so many academic struggles as a child. And when I started college at Auburn University. When I started, I had the reading and writing ability of a fourth grader. But because my ex-husband was going to school there, they encouraged couples to go to school together for them to grow together. Mm-hmm. And so even though I did poorly on the entrance exam, they allowed me to go to school on probation. And for my academic career, I was always on probation, but I always seemed to make it through too.
There you have it. You know, Bonnie, what message did you get from your vision of your grandmother in reference to the call on your life?
Well, I was in a stage of despair over the breakup of my marriage. And my ex had picked up my kids for Christmas, and I was at a stage in my life where I couldn't afford to buy my kids Christmas presents. And I didn't want to go on anymore. And so I went to bed that night. Never wanting to wake up.
Oh, wow.
And I had a vision. And the vision started with a kaleidoscope. And the kaleidoscope turned into Jesus's face. Now, I really didn't know Jesus. I remember his picture from going to Bible school and, church classes when I was a child. Mm-hmm. But as the kaleidoscope went on, Jesus led me to a path. And I started running up this path, and I knew I had gone in the right direction. And at the top of the path was my grandmother, and she was on the right hand of Jesus. And she didn't speak to me, but there was a message that came from her. She held her hand up, and the message that came from her was, "Go back, child. Your job is not done."
Wow.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. Take your time.
Your job is not done. So I woke up in the morning. I woke up the morning refreshed and ready to go, and I thought, what is there for me? I'm nobody. And from that, I kept wondering, well, what did my grandmother mean? Well, I just, went on with life and, everything else. And it was years later that I found out what my purpose was. And I was in a void in my life. And my mother had encouraged me to do some volunteer work. And you automatically think of things like working in the hospital and everything, but that never appealed to me. Well, I was watching an ad one day. I came home from work, and I was watching an ad on television, and it was for Missouri Coalition's literacy program. And my parents had been charter members of the literacy program in Michigan. So I thought, well, I really couldn't read that well. But in this ad, they were doing math, and math was my subject. And I thought, well, I can teach math. So I called them, and they said, if you can read it all, you can teach our program. So I went through the program, and the only location that kept drawing me to it, it was like I was looking through a list of centers that I could work at and help people who needed help with reading or math or whatever. And the only thing that jumped out at me was City Jail in St. Louis. And I ignored it, and I'd go over the list again, and City Jail kept jumping out at me. Well, I knew by that happening that I had to go down to City Jail to teach in the Adult Basic Education and GED program and help with inmates who had trouble reading or if they had trouble with their math skills. So it was that time at City Jail that I realized what my call and purpose was, because through meeting the different inmates there, I met an innocent man who everyone knew was innocent, and that wound up being my call, battling injustice in the state of Missouri and fighting for the freedom of an innocent person, and discovering that a system that I believed in, that I trusted in, and discovering that that system had a bunch of corrupt people in it. Mm-hmm. And it was my job to expose this and take it to the highest level in the state and try and get freedom for this man who was wrongfully incarcerated and who was living and who was spending a living death sentence in prison for the rest of his life. So that was my call. My job was to fight injustice.
Wow. Bonnie, that is an absolutely incredible story. Thank you so much for sharing, and what a great segue that you've established, because that's the next place that I wanted to go. Because while you were teaching at City Jail, listen, you met several types of inmates there. So first and foremost, in addition to Gregory, talk to us about those types of inmates that you met. And really specifically with Gregory, tell us a little bit more about his story and why you felt the need to champion his cause.
Okay, all right. Well, when I walked into City Jail, it's kind of an intimidating situation, with the doors banging behind you and everything. Mm-hmm. And the first thing I witnessed was a holding cell there must have been 20 men in that holding cell. Some were half naked, drunk, drugged up, whatever, okay? Oh. And they were all black. And this was an eye-opener for me because as I continued to go down to City Jail, the population at City Jail in St. Louis was 95% black male population. Wow. And the crimes were murder and or rape. So here I was, Miss Middle Class Suburbia, in an environment that was eye-opening to me, I might say. And what I discovered with these men, most of these men were young enough to be my sons. And I discovered the different types of soil. Just like you hear the preacher preaching about the parable of the sower and the different types of soil, you have the same thing in prison that you have out in society. One young man, I used a couple fictitious names because of the charges in the case and everything. Mm-hmm. But all four of the examples that I witnessed in the jail all four of them were convicted of first-degree murder. One young man, I would say, his soil, with teaching him or working with him in any way, his soil was like throwing seeds on the roadside where they couldn't take root. They couldn't do anything. He was a young man that he was a boxer, and he was a tough young man. And the guards told me to watch out for him because he was mean. And then there was another young man who wound up on death row. And he was the seeds that was sown in the thorns where they could take root. He knew the word, but it just didn't make a difference in his life. This young man wound up on death row. He was a 3-time loser. Another young man who, used to make me laugh. He made me laugh all the time. And he was convicted, too, of first-degree murder. And he was the kind of seed that you throw in the rocks. And some of them grab root, and some of them don't. But unfortunately, he was also the type young man who could copy other people's work. He was a follower. He really couldn't create for himself, but he was a delight to work with. And then there was Gregory. Gregory was the seed sown in the good soil. As a matter of fact, Gregory is the reason I came to know the Lord. He was different than the other inmates. He stood above them, not only in size, but he'd walk into a room and he had a smile on his face. At the end of each class, he would go around and all the instructors and the volunteers, he would shake their hands and thank them for coming, into the jail. And he was the fellow that every time I'd walk in on conversations about he and his brother, and people were saying that he was innocent. And he sat in jail almost 2 years waiting trial for a crime he didn't commit. Wow. And part of that reason was because they joined his trial with his mentally impaired brother who actually committed the crime. And he had to sit and wait for his brother going through all of the testing and everything else. And so they violated his right to a speedy trial while he sat and waited for his mentally impaired brother to be tested, which was proven he did have organic brain damage. So that was pretty much the balance of the inmates that are there. I mean, there was talent there, there was intellect there, there was abuse there was all sorts of things that you ran into between the different inmates, but they were not throwaway people. They were people that the right person showing them the right way could make a difference in their life. And that's kind of like our society today. We've got the different types of ground in each individual person that we try and sow seeds in. Some of it takes and some of it doesn't take. So that's pretty much your balance there.
Bonnie, listen, one of the only thing that I can say that comes to mind is wow. I mean, this is absolutely incredible, everything that you're saying. And as unfortunate as it is, depending on the particular community in which you come from, this is an all too common story that we hear happening around us all of the time. Now, Bonnie, things get even more extreme. Now, listen, guys, you know what you have to do, okay? Amazon and Barnes & Noble are where you have to go. You got to purchase the book. If you want to gather everything that Bonnie has in store and all of the information and her journey that she's comprised, you got to pick up the book, and you're doing yourself a disservice if you didn't. Bonnie, next question that I want to go into, your journey with being an advocate for justice, right, has led to some remarkable circumstances. Now, I'm not going to go too much. I don't want to steal your thunder, but talk to us about the fact that, hey, you were thrown in jail for justice sake, what that meant, your experience in jail, and really a culmination of everything that you experienced.
Well, that's one of those things that was just kind of enlightening to me. one thing that we learn as Christians, that God's going to, when you are in your call and purpose, when you are fulfilling that call and purpose in your life, God is going to ask things of you that you don't necessarily want to do, but you know you have to do them. And the jail episode was one that I was pre-warned about. I was doing a study. I was working on my graduate degree at Wheaton College, and I was doing a study on Martin Luther King. And in one of the books that I was looking at, there was a picture of King being arrested and manhandled in Birmingham and getting thrown in jail. Mm-hmm. And I kept being drawn to this picture, and I'm thinking, God, what are you trying to tell me? And then the message came, you've got to be thrown in jail for justice's sake. And I'm thinking, right, yeah, sure. This is going to happen to me, right? And I kept getting it. And I said, and I prayed hard, okay, for a couple hours. And finally God won. And I said, okay, God, if I have to go to jail for justice's sake, you're going to have to confirm this. So sure enough, my neighbors upstairs called me upstairs to watch a movie. And the name of the movie was Cry Freedom. And the movie was about Stephen Biko, the South African apartheid leader who was jailed and martyred for justice's sake and for his activities with civil rights. And I'm thinking, oh my God, that's confirmation number one. I've got to be thrown in jail for justice's sake. And I didn't want to be thrown in jail, you know? And then I went to church, and a word was spoken over me that 3 people were going to come against me, and that I was blessed and ordained to go through this. And as soon as the pastor said 3 people, I saw 3 appeal court judges striking out at me. And I thought, there's confirmation number 2. I have to go to jail for justice's sake. So what I wound up doing is I got a copy of the briefs for the first appeal hearing for Gregory's case. And I had to be there at that appeal hearing. I knew I had to be there at the appeal hearing, but I also knew I was going to be arrested that day. And so when I read the briefs from the state, it was a joke to me. There was nothing pertaining to his guilt or innocence. So I wound up running into something in my studies, and I wrote a brief myself arguing against what the state was arguing. And I knew when I had to have it to the court for the judges to see. And I showed up in the courtroom, and his lawyer argued 2 points. One, that Gregory didn't murder anyone, and 2, that the critical issue is why the court upheld the jury decision. And I'm thinking, oh, gee, we got this, right? And when she finished, that one judge, and I knew which judge it was going to be, spoke out against me in open court, saying I had no business writing the court, and he questioned the fact, and he thought I was a lawyer. And when he found out I was a divinity student, that didn't set very well, you know, and I argued so strongly against it. And as a matter of fact, that letter I wrote is in the sequel to my book that was primarily written by my husband, Gregory Oliver, and that is Walking Free from Bondage to Liberty. And so anyways, after the court, I went down to visit Gregory to let him know how the appeal hearing went. While I was there, I was arrested. I was handcuffed. I was spent 3 hours in a drunk tank. And then I was transported over 125 miles for not even a misdemeanor that happened over 4 years prior to when I got arrested.
Wow.
That's all I'm going to say. I won't tell you the charge, but you can be sure when you read the charge, you'll say, you've got to be kidding me. You know, it was that bad. That's just, you know, that's one of it. But then as I grew in writing my letters and presenting Greg's case, I wound up presenting his case to the governor's office. multiple times, and I did it in a very light-hearted, positive way, and I managed to get his case in the governor's office, and the governor wound up commuting his sentence. After 10 years of study, after 3 governors looking at his case was finally commuted, and Gregory walked out of prison, and he was never to see the light of day. He received a life sentence without parole and a life sentence with parole, running wild, they call it. That's, not consecutive, but one right after another. So he was never going to see the light of day. And he walked out of prison after 22 years. And that's how long the struggle took. It took over 20 years to get him out of prison. But all the steps along the way, I discovered how to communicate with people in authority and how to expose injustices that the people in authority were committing and laws that they were breaking in order to convict an innocent man. And it was unbelievable, some of the things that I was able to do. And Gregory mentioned to me, coins a phrase, they say, you see something, you say something. Most people won't if they see something going wrong. Mm-hmm. This is a situation where I saw something, I couldn't stand to see it happen anymore. And so I said something and I did something. So it was just one of those things. And I felt compelled to do it because the Lord was guiding me through the whole thing. And every step I made, I knew that God was leading me, and every step I made, I could see the results of his leadership through the whole thing. And we got a victory, but we're still fighting to get the victory to get him totally exonerated.
Mm-hmm. Guys, you can't make this up. You can't make this up.
No.
Bonnie, listen, if somebody doesn't create a movie about your life, there's something wrong here, okay? Because this story needs to be up on the silver screen. This is absolutely incredible. Listen, last question as we tie out of this wonderful interview. What has FAITHWALK meant to you?
Everything. It has given me purpose. It has given me direction. It has helped me overcome depression and despair. It has shown me that I am somebody that I am somebody, and that I am comfortable in my own skin now. I never was when I was younger, but I am comfortable in my own skin now. But the other thing that it does is it wakes you up in the morning, it keeps you going, and the best thing of all, it keeps me youthful.
I absolutely love it. Guys, you know what I love even more? Is we're at the end of the interview now. We've discussed so much information, and yet we've barely scratched the surface. I mean, there's still so much left to be discovered. Listen, I'm going to say it for you once more, even though I know I don't have to. I know the majority of you all are already there as you're listening to this interview, but I'm going to re-impress it once more. Here on the line with Bonnie Lou Oliver. We just finished discussing her wonderful memoir, FAITHWALK, From Darkness to Light. Available for purchase through Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com, but make sure you're heading directly to her personal site, BonnieOliverFaithWalk.com, to gather everything that she has in store. You surely will not be disappointed. Let's grow, let's develop, let's educate ourselves. And it starts with this amazing narrative. Bonnie, this has been an absolute pleasure, such an honor. Thank you once again for being a guest with us today on People of Distinction.
And thank you very much, Benjie.